Rachel, a 28-year-old young woman, was facing one of the toughest moments of her life. After losing her job in a big city, she decided to return to the small town where she grew up, hoping to find some comfort and start over. She felt discouraged and without prospects, but believed that returning to her roots might help her find a new direction. One day, while exploring the outskirts of town, Rachel found an abandoned dog in a park. The animal was dirty, hungry, and visibly scared. His eyes reflected both fear and hope. Rachel, heartbroken by the animal's condition, decided to take him home. She named the dog Leo, a name she had always wanted to give a pet. When she got home, Rachel took care of Leo, giving him a bath, food, and a warm place to rest. Over time, Leo began to show signs of recovery, and a strong bond formed between them. Rachel felt that somehow taking care of Leo was helping her deal with her own emotional problems. However, life in the small town was not easy either. Rachel needed to find a job to support herself and her new friend. Rachel started looking for work in town, but opportunities were scarce. She did odd jobs for neighbors, but the money was barely enough to cover basic needs. During this time, Leo also faced his own challenges. He was still traumatized by the abandonment and was afraid to approach other people. Rachel realized that they both needed time to heal and find stability. One morning, while Rachel was walking with Leo in the park, she met an elderly lady named Mrs. Martha, who lived alone in a large old house. Mrs. Martha noticed Leo's condition and offered Rachel a temporary job helping to take care of her vast garden. Although it wasn't exactly what Rachel was looking for, she gratefully accepted the offer, knowing that any work would help. The work in Mrs. Martha's garden was exhausting, but Rachel dedicated herself wholeheartedly, knowing it was an opportunity to earn some money and, at the same time, help someone in need. Leo, in turn, began to show signs of improvement. He ran around the garden, playing and exploring the new environment. Mrs. Martha's presence also seemed to have a calming effect on him. Gradually, Leo began to approach her, gaining confidence. But before we continue, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you love animals and their fascinating stories. While working in the garden, Rachel and Mrs. Martha talked a lot. Mrs. Martha shared stories of her youth and how she had also faced many difficulties in life. These conversations inspired Rachel and gave her the strength to keep fighting. Leo, observing the growing friendship between the two, seemed to feel that he was finally in a safe and loving place. However, life continued to present challenges. One afternoon, Leo disappeared. Rachel panicked and, along with Mrs. Martha, began searching for him around town. After hours of searching, they found Leo trapped in an animal trap in the nearby woods. He was hurt and scared. Rachel's heart ached to see her friend in such a situation, but she and Mrs. Martha managed to free him and take him to the vet. At the vet, Rachel stayed by Leo's side as he received the necessary care. The wounds were severe, but the vet assured her that with proper treatment and plenty of rest, Leo would recover. During this time, Rachel never left her friend's side. The experience brought them even closer, strengthening the already strong bond between them. Mrs. Martha also offered constant support, proving to be a true friend in a time of need. With Leo in recovery, Rachel continued working in Mrs. Martha's garden, but now with a new purpose. She decided to transform the garden into a therapeutic space where people from the community could come to relax and find peace. Mrs. Martha loved the idea and offered all the necessary support. Together, they started transforming the garden into a refuge of tranquility and beauty. During the process of transforming the garden, Rachel and Mrs. Martha organized a community event to involve the town's residents. They came in large numbers, bringing plants, flowers, and even benches to help create the space. Leo's presence, now recovered, cheered everyone up. He had become a symbol of resilience and overcoming, inspiring everyone around him. The garden began to bloom, reflecting the effort and love of everyone involved. However, Leo's recovery still had obstacles. He needed physical therapy to fully regain the mobility of one of his legs that had been injured in the trap. Determined to see her friend fully recovered, Rachel learned animal physical therapy techniques and dedicated herself to helping Leo daily. Every little progress was celebrated, and Leo responded with a loyalty and love that filled Rachel's heart with hope and gratitude. As the therapeutic garden thrived, word spread throughout the town and beyond. People from other communities began to visit, attracted by the garden's beauty and the inspiring story of Leo and Rachel. The space not only brought peace and joy to the residents, but also began to generate a small income through donations and special events. Seeing the positive impact she was making, Rachel felt more motivated than ever to continue working hard. During one of these visits, a man named Edward, who was a physical therapist specializing in animals, was particularly moved by Rachel's dedication and Leo's courage. Edward offered his services for free to help with Leo's recovery, teaching Rachel advanced techniques and providing specialized equipment. Edward's help was invaluable, and Leo began to show significant improvement, regaining strength and mobility in his leg. The relationship between Rachel, Mrs. Martha, and Edward strengthened. They formed a small community of mutual support, sharing experiences, knowledge, and above all, hope. Leo became a kind of mascot for the garden, always present, cheering up visitors with his renewed energy and his story of overcoming. The connection between the characters and the dog deepened, and Rachel felt she had finally found her place in the world. However, a new challenge arose. Mrs. Martha began to have health problems, and Rachel found herself torn between taking care of her friend and continuing her work in the garden. Edward, always ready to help, offered to take care of the garden while Rachel dedicated herself to Mrs. Martha. With Edward's support and the strength Leo gave her, Rachel managed to balance both responsibilities. The garden continued to thrive, and Mrs. Martha, despite facing difficulties, felt surrounded by love and care. Days passed, and Mrs. Martha's health worsened. Rachel and Edward did everything they could to take care of her, but they knew her time was running out. One peaceful night, Mrs. Martha called Rachel close and with a gentle smile, thanked her for bringing so much love and joy in her final days. She asked Rachel to continue taking care of the garden and the community, leaving a legacy of hope and unity. That night, Mrs. Martha passed away peacefully, surrounded by those who loved her. Mrs. Martha's loss was a hard blow for Rachel, but it also motivated her to honor her friend's memory by dedicating herself even more to the therapeutic garden. Leo, always by her side, seemed to understand Rachel's pain and offered comfort with his constant presence. Edward, also shaken by the loss, committed to continuing to help Rachel and ensuring the garden thrived as Mrs. Martha had wished. Over time, the therapeutic garden became a true sanctuary for the community. Rachel organized events in memory of Mrs. Martha, bringing people together to share stories, plant new flowers, and celebrate life. Leo became a constant and welcoming presence, bringing joy to all who visited. The garden not only thrived but also inspired other communities to create similar spaces, spreading the message of love and resilience. Then one day, while Rachel and Edward were working in the garden, they received an unexpected visit. It was a team of documentarians who had heard about the garden's inspiring story and wanted to make a film about Rachel, Leo, and the community's transformation. The news brought a wave of excitement and emotion. Rachel saw it as an opportunity to share the message of hope and overcoming with an even larger audience, inspiring others to create positive changes in their own communities. The arrival of the documentary team brought new energy to the garden. Rachel, Leo, and Edward shared their stories on camera, recalling the challenges faced and the achievements reached. The documentary captured the essence of the therapeutic garden, showing how a small act of kindness and perseverance could transform lives. Leo, as always, stole the show with his contagious energy and story of overcoming. As the documentary was produced, the community became even more united. People of all ages and backgrounds began to visit the garden, not just to see the place but to experience the story of love and resilience it represented. The film was released and quickly became a success, touching hearts around the world. Donations and letters of support began to pour in from all over, allowing Rachel to expand the garden and help even more people. Amid all this success, something unexpected happened. During a community event, an elderly man approached Rachel with tears in his eyes. He introduced himself as Mr. Albert, Leo's former owner. Mr. Albert explained that he had lost Leo during a storm and had searched for him tirelessly, but without success. Upon seeing the documentary, he immediately recognized his faithful companion and came to thank Rachel for taking such good care of him. Rachel was moved by Mr. Albert's story and, although she was attached to Leo, knew that he originally belonged to the man who loved him so much. Seeing Leo's reaction upon reuniting with Mr. Albert, With joyful barks and jumps of happiness, Rachel knew she was doing the right thing. With tears in her eyes, she hugged Leo and let him go with Mr. Albert, knowing her friend was going back home. Even with Leo's departure, the therapeutic garden continued to thrive. Rachel, with Edward's support and the community's help, continued to expand and improve the space, honoring Mrs. Martha's memory and Leo's inspiring story. Rachel and Leo's journey became a symbol of hope and resilience, showing that even in the toughest times, love and perseverance can transform lives. And so, Leo and Mrs. Martha's legacy continued to live through the garden, touching the hearts of all who visited. Thank you for watching this incredible story of courage and loyalty. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and leave your like so you don't miss any of our exciting stories. See you next time.